For just a brief, shining moment in history, humanity actually walked on another world. It was incredible. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, it stopped. Cold. Why? Well, today, we're going to dig into a source that offers a pretty startling answer to one of the biggest mysteries of the space age. Why did we really stop going to the moon? I mean, think about it. After achieving what was thought to be impossible, why has it been over 50 years since a single human being has set foot on the lunar surface? The source we're diving into today puts forward a really wild theory, and we're going to unpack all the pieces of evidence it presents one by one. Okay, so let's just look at the timeline. The Apollo program kicks off in 1961. Just 8 years later, which is amazing in itself, we get the first moon landing. But by 1972, with Apollo 17 coming home, it's all over. It's this intense 11-year sprint of activity, followed by, well, over half a century of nothing. So the source asks a pretty good question. What happened in that tiny window? Our source actually frames this whole saga as an unfinished journey. It was this monumental, species-defining achievement that just stopped. It was shut down so abruptly, leaving so much of the moon completely unexplored. And listen, this wasn't some small side project. Our source points out that from just Apollo 7 to 17, the program cost an estimated $25.5 billion. That is a massive, massive investment, and it honestly just makes the sudden stop all the more confusing. Why would you pour so much money and effort into something only to walk away right at the peak of your success? All right, so the first piece of evidence that our source presents starts with a secret. A secret, it says, was hidden right there in a photograph. And this is where the official story really starts to get interesting. So let me introduce you to a man named Karl R. According to the source, Wolf was a U.S. Air Force sergeant, and back in 1965, he was working in a top-secret National Security Agency lab. His job was pretty technical. He was in charge of maintaining all this high-precision photo equipment. This basically put him in a position to see things that very, very few people were ever meant to see. Then one day, the story goes, Wolf gets pulled into a darkroom by a pilot who just casually drops this absolute bombshell. Imagine hearing that. A base on the far side of the moon. Wolf, as you can imagine, was completely floored. So the pilot then supposedly shows him this mosaic of photos that were taken by a lunar orbiter. And Wolf claims that once you got past all the classified markings, you could see something that was just impossible. Clear, man-made, or, well, artificial structures. He described these huge geometric buildings, really tall towers, and even things that looked like giant radar dishes, all on the side of the moon we can never see. Now, look, a whistleblower story is one thing, but our source then introduces a second part to the story, and this one is even more unusual. It involves a top-secret CIA project that sounds like it was pulled straight out of a science fiction movie. And this brings us to our second key figure, a man named Ingo Swann. The source presents Swann as a psychic who was recruited by the CIA for a program testing something called remote viewing, which is the supposed ability to see distant places using only your mind. The source we're looking at links Swann's supposed power to a concept it calls Tien Yan, which you can translate as the third eye. It's this idea of a kind of supernatural sight, right? The ability to perceive things far beyond what our normal human senses are capable of. So, during an experiment in 1975, Swann was apparently asked to use this ability to take a look at the moon. As he went into this deep, focused state, he started describing what he was seeing. And here's the crazy part. His descriptions almost perfectly matched what Karl Wolf said he saw in those photos. Swann started talking about these clear, glass-like domes and other strange architectural structures. But then, the experiment took a really dark turn. Swann apparently became very distressed. When the researchers finally brought him out of his trance, he explained that he'd encountered beings there. They looked human-like, but they seemed to know they were being observed. He said he felt a real sense of danger and noted that even though they looked human, they might not be. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds completely unbelievable. But to back up these claims, the source points to this experiment as proof that Swann was legit. In April of 1973, Swann was asked to remote view the planet Jupiter. He described seeing a halo or a ring around it, something that, at the time, science didn't know existed. But then 7 months later, NASA's Pioneer 10 spacecraft flew by and sent back the first close-up images, and what do you know? It confirmed Jupiter did, in fact, have rings. So, okay, we have the alleged photos from the sergeant, and we have the vision from the psychic. The source then presents its third, and honestly, its most explosive piece of evidence, a claim that it says comes directly from the first man to ever walk on the moon. This claim is all about a supposedly secret radio transmission from Neil Armstrong himself during that historic Apollo 11 mission. It's a part of the conversation with Houston that, according to our source, the public was never ever supposed to hear. And this is the alleged message. Armstrong, sounding like he's in a state of shock, supposedly reported seeing enormous objects on the rim of a crater. He described other spacecraft just lined up, watching them. The source claims this transmission was cut off immediately and was never released. And if it's real, it lines up perfectly with the details from both Wolf and Swann. So how does this all fit together? Well, in its final section, the source takes these three threads, the whistleblower, the psychic, and the astronaut, and weaves them all into one single, pretty shocking conclusion. So let's just do a quick recap of the case our source is making. It's really resting on three pillars, right? First, you've got the alleged photos of artificial structures that were seen by Sergeant Wolf. Second, you have the vision from the psychic, Ingo Swann, which seems to back it all up. And third, you have that secret, panicked message supposedly from Neil Armstrong himself. And all of this leads to the source's ultimate theory, that humanity didn't just abandon the moon because of budget cuts or fading interest. No. According to this narrative, we stopped going because we found something there. Or maybe someone. A discovery so profound, so reality-shattering, that the only option was to halt all future missions and bury the secret forever. And that's the narrative laid out in our source material, a story of secret photos, psychic spies, and a lost message from an American hero. Is this the hidden truth behind our 50-year absence from the moon? Or is it just a really compelling modern legend? The source has presented its case. The rest is for you to decide.